Ethan Carter, CEO of the Brewhaven coffee chain, had built his company with a vision of warmth and community. But lately, disturbing reports had surfaced about one specific location, the Black Hollow branch. Unlike the usual complaints about slow service or minor issues, this cafe seemed to exist in a shroud of secrecy. Numbers didn't add up, customers had dwindled, and no one from his regional management team dared to investigate. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan decided to go himself, alone and undercover. Dressed in worn-out clothes, a hoodie, and thick-rimmed glasses, he drove deep into Black Hollow, a town that felt frozen in time. The moment he stepped inside the cafe, a chill ran down his spine. The air was heavy, thick with something unseen. Dim, flickering lights cast long shadows on the cracked walls, and a musty scent of damp wood clung to the air. A young waitress, Lily, greeted him with a hesitant smile, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. Behind the counter, the barista, Jake, barely looked up. Something was wrong. Ethan could feel it, an overwhelming sense of unease settled over him like a dark fog. Then, a door creaked open from the back. A low voice, raspy and unnatural, cut through the silence. "You're late," the manager, Martin, sneered at Lily. Ethan gritted his teeth. Whatever was happening here, it was far worse than he had imagined. Ethan settled into a corner booth, pretending to sip on a bitter, oddly scentless coffee as he observed the cafe's operations. The tension in the air was suffocating. Lily moved quickly between tables, her hands shaking slightly as she refilled a customer's cup. Jake, behind the counter, stole nervous glances toward the kitchen, as if expecting something, or someone, to emerge. Then, it happened. A customer, an elderly man in a flannel shirt, frowned at his plate. "These eggs are burnt," he muttered, waving Lily over. She hurried to apologize, offering to have them remade. Before she could take the plate, a chilling voice sliced through the air. "How many times do I have to tell you to check the damn orders?" Ethan's fingers clenched around his cup as he turned toward the kitchen. Martin, the shift manager, stood in the doorway, his skeletal frame half hidden in the dim lighting. His face was twisted in a sneer, but his eyes, there was something wrong with them. Black, glassy, almost hollow. Lily flinched as if she had been struck. Jake tensed behind the counter, his grip tightening around a coffee pot. No one else in the cafe moved. It was as if they had learned to ignore the horror in plain sight. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He had come to investigate a failing business. But what he had found felt much closer to a curse. Ethan had seen enough. He set his cup down, the ceramic scraping against the worn-out table as he stood. The cafe was rotting from the inside out, not just from mismanagement, but from something far darker. "That's enough," he said, his voice steady but ice cold. Martin turned slowly, his mouth curling into a sneer. "And who do you think you are?" Ethan pulled a worn leather wallet from his pocket and flipped it open. The gleam of his CEO badge reflected under the cafe's flickering lights. A hush fell over the room. Lily's breath hitched. Jake's grip on the coffee pot slackened. Even the customers seemed to sense the shift, eyes darting between the two men. But Martin, he didn't flinch. If anything, his sneer deepened, something almost inhuman twisting in the hollows of his face. Then, the lights flickered violently. The air turned thick, too thick, as if the cafe itself was breathing, exhaling something ancient and rotten. The shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, moving even though no one else did. And Martin? His reflection in the coffee machine wasn't his. Ethan's stomach turned. He had come here expecting bad management, expecting stress and overworked employees. But this was something else entirely. Something old. Something wrong. And it was staring right at him. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. The room was suffocating, shrinking around him, as if something unseen coiled in the shadows, waiting. Martin stood still, but his reflection twisted, moving out of sync, its mouth stretching wide in a grin that was too sharp, too wrong. Lily let out a small, broken gasp. Jake took a step back, nearly knocking over a stack of cups. Ethan didn't hesitate. He wasn't just dealing with a toxic manager, he was dealing with something unnatural. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the thick, suffocating air. "You're done, Martin." A crackle echoed through the cafe, like distant thunder, but from inside the walls. The shadows shrank back, pulsing violently. Martin's face twitched, something flickering behind his hollow eyes. Then, he laughed. Low. Cruel. Twisting into something not meant for human ears. The cafe shook, the hanging lights swaying violently. The air turned freezing cold. Lily grabbed onto the counter, her breath visible in the sudden chill. Ethan didn't break. He held Martin's gaze, unwavering. "You don't belong here." The words carried weight, something deeper than authority, something absolute. Martin lurched backward as if dragged by unseen hands. The lights flashed once, twice, then a sickening snap. And suddenly, the cafe was still. The air lightened. The tension, the wrongness, it was gone. Ethan exhaled, his hands still clenched into fists. Lily and Jake stared at him, their eyes wide with something between fear and relief. It was over. Martin was gone. The cafe stood eerily still in the aftermath. The suffocating weight in the air had lifted, and for the first time since Ethan had stepped inside, he could finally breathe. The flickering light stabilized, the hum of the coffee machine softened, and the shadows, once unnaturally alive, retreated back to where they belonged. Lily collapsed onto a nearby stool, her hands shaking as she covered her mouth. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his fingers still gripping the counter as if grounding himself. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, taking in the cafe, not as the haunted, decaying place it had been, but as something salvageable. "It's over," he said, voice steady, certain. And for the first time, it actually felt true. But there was still work to do. 3 days later, Brewhaven reopened. The once dim, lifeless cafe now hummed with warmth. Customers returned, filling the space with laughter and conversation instead of hushed whispers and unease. Ethan kept his promise. Lily was promoted to manager, her pay doubled. Jake was given a raise, along with a few new hires to ease the workload. The darkness had been purged, not just the supernatural one, but the toxic one that had poisoned the staff for far too long. As Ethan prepared to leave, he glanced once more at the cafe's clock. It read the correct time. For the first time in years, it was moving forward. And so was Brewhaven.